Nathan, it was the first time I actually met you this evening, and we had literally a 1-minute chat on the seats over there. So you talked a little bit about purpose before, and how does purpose kind of drive the ideas of the Dream Factory and Inspire 9, and kind of can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because we actually talked about it quite a bit in the last one, and just want to know your kind of thoughts on purpose, really.
Yeah, I suppose like thinking about back in 20 years ago. I was disenfranchised by these companies that just seemed to be all about profit and loss. And I think for me, and I think for a lot of people these days, we're looking for something deeper. I can't imagine working or being a part of something and wanting to grow something and contributing to something that wasn't there for a higher purpose, for a greater good, other than just making money. I feel like perhaps existentially, where there's this movement that's going through society where people are questioning some of the fundamental underpinnings of what we're doing and who we are. I mean, you walk into the city these days and everyone's wearing suits and they all look the same, they dress the same, they've got the same shoes on, they've got the same ties and collars and all this sort of stuff, and they walk into these buildings and, with the co-working spaces, I talk about this paradigm of like the old world offices being inspired by the Industrial Revolution. We used to have like these factory floors with a machine every, equidistant all the way along for like 30, 40 meters, and then the same thing along. And you just take these machines and just like replicate them and stick them in a box and then make the building 40 stories high and make the same thing every story. And it's almost like we've used that as our inspiration for offices. And so now you just replace the machines with cubicles and people go and work in these cubicles 40 stories high, and it just seems so mechanical, and I feel like it's certainly devoid of purpose. It's devoid of humanity. It's devoid of people-centered workplaces. So with Inspire 9, we've had these labels pinned to us, like talking about the future of work and whatnot. And I'm not so sure that we are deeply rooted in the future of work. It's more just, I guess, purpose and purpose-driven work.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks. So also, I mean, at the start, you kind of almost stumbled across, you wanted to bring the great minds together and everything else, but you stumbled across the fact that community was growing. Did you ever think about your own personal development at this stage and how you can build communities? So obviously the nature of this talk this evening is how to build a community around your business. Did you have to develop your own skills to think about growing the communities even more and more? Was that, yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, the personal component of that community building resonated with me. Like I was attracted to this idea of like being a host, and I think that the more that it happened, like I would meet 15, 20, 30 people a day, every day for years and years on end. So certainly I had to develop certain skills to be able to cope with that. Even like at the start, I loved it, and then after a while, I had to work to try and make it not transactional and like really learn to, like from a personal level, to ensure that I had energy for myself as well as for everybody else. And then, yeah, absolutely, like the journey of building out that, considering the growth that was there, of building out that team and thinking about such a different type of business. Like a lot of the business books that you read are about, different types of companies than Inspire 9. They're not about community-centric companies. They're not about like companies that measure things other than profit and loss. And so, yeah, a lot of it was learning. A lot of it was making mistakes. A lot of it was engaging, working with people, I guess, like quite openly and quite like with a lot of humility to say, hey, listen, we don't have all the answers. We're going to be working through this for the first time with you. But if you want to come on board and join our community team, then we'd love to have you.
Now, Nathan, when you shared your story before, I could feel the excitement and the passion that you have for the community. Can you share with us today a story where you just kind of sat back and you thought, oh, this is really cool?
Honestly, nowadays, that's all that I do. Like, I think when you start in a community like that, like who in the room has founded a community? Okay, cool. Who in the room is part of a community? Oh, come on, you must all be part of office communities at least, or work communities. I think within communities, I think there are, there has to be healthy communities can be sustained without any particular element inside of them. Healthy communities are like those resilient communities that even when some of the core people leave, that they still continue to move on and grow. And so certainly, yeah, when you talk about sitting back and watching things happen, like I realized quite early on that I needed to let this community be its own thing, and that there had to be a natural energy of that community moving forward without someone actively community building the entire time. And yeah, that was a hard thing for me to do because I was like so attracted to this community. It was so amazing. I just wanted to get involved and like be a part of every part of it. But certainly, like that would be probably not for the better interests of the community. And so yeah, it was amazing to step back and be able to objectively see all the little things that popped up, and all kinds of crazy stuff happened. Okay, like a story just from recently. Last week, okay, a couple of years ago, we had this huge white wall in one of our co-working spaces, and we started to ask around people in the community, like, what do you think we should do with this wall? And someone was connected with one of Melbourne's most well-known street artists, this guy called Mike Macatron. And like literally the weekend after we heard about this connection, Mike Macatron strutted into our co-working space and like painted this huge mural on one of our walls. And it was unreal. And, you know, nowadays I get to travel a bit for work, and I get to go to Brooklyn. And, you know, sure enough, you'll be walking along Brooklyn and you'll see Mike Macatron's work on the side of this huge building. He's like this famous artist, and this guy just came in. Like, I think that communities do a great job of making the world seem small and accessible. Like anything is possible because of networks and connections. Yeah, I think that the world that got presented to me in my educational years was that there's a hierarchy and you have to work your way up, and there's institutions and bureaucracy. I feel like co-working can break all that down and turn it into something that's ultimately accessible. Anything you can think of, I bet you there's someone who can help you get there.
I've always believed that you don't really connect the dots as you're going through the journey, but it's only when you look backwards that you connect the dots and you see how things have all contributed to where things are today. Have you always understood what this community meant and what was possible with it, or is it only in reflection that you can see?
What it means, like in terms of what the community has meant, I feel like in every community there's something that's innate to that community. The culture, the people, like the fabric, the trust networks, that is individual of any community. And so I think for me, having been a part of the Inspire 9 community, I've always had a sense for like what that feels like for us. The hardest part is like convincing everyone else. The hardest part is like, you know, sort of having to justify like why this is such an amazing thing. Being a part of community is like so incredible. It's hard to then talk to people who aren't a part of it and tell them you just sound like a cult person, like you just sound like you've drank some Kool-Aid when you're saying no, it's just amazing. Like there's all these people that you get to meet, and we do these incredible things, and it's like this money that just falls down from the ceiling, and then you're on this technology and your phone explodes, and you know, everyone just thinks you're crazy. But perhaps that's part of the beauty of it, is that like you really do have to experience it. It's such an experiential, adventure.
Have you ever felt you were crazy?
I think I'm crazy every day. And then I get over that by about 9.
You know, I often hear that passion is a bit of a double-edged sword. You know, there's great things that come with it. It gives you staying power, it gives you that energy to push through and take things to the next level. But there's also a bit of a dark side to passion. It burns you out. It makes you exhausted. Can you share a bit more about this?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So in my other couple of lives, so through my community, I also started a startup accelerator. In 2010, I founded Melbourne's first startup accelerator called AngelCube. AngelCube was a company that gave early stage seed capital to entrepreneurs, and we would help them grow their business and grow their idea and get them through to the next stage of funding and help them grow and become an international company. We invested in 32 companies over 5 years. Every year there would be like sort of 3 months intensive where the program was running, and then there'd be a couple of months afterwards where there would be, we do a road show where we would take these teams to the US and to Sydney and all around the world to help them fundraise and grow. So I was running that I was running that company as well as trying to run Inspire 9. And then I also had a software company. So I had these 3 CEO-ships, and I had these 3 teams and 3 areas of concerns and 3 places that I was super passionate about, that I was like investing time and energy into. And I loved them all, and they were all very, very special to me. And for me, I wasn't akin to the idea of making rational decisions to the point where I was able to let go of these sorts of things. It wasn't until 2015 where I'd been doing this for year upon year upon year. And you touched on it before, but has anyone heard the term burnout before? Yeah, so burnout, I think, is this concept of giving energy to something and it not being regenerative. These 3 companies were incredible, and the opportunities were amazing, and each of them were growing in their own right and doing great things, and I was proud of them. But they were draining, they were intensive, and I wasn't able to get time. Somehow I managed to steal myself away for 7 days. So if you're an entrepreneur or you run your own business, then 7 days away from work in a year is amazing. It's probably my first holiday in a couple of years, and I found myself on the way to Thailand to meet a couple of friends, and both of those friends actually skipped out on me, and so I was in Thailand by myself. And I tweeted out on social media and said, like, hey, what should I do in Thailand? I've got all this time now. I've got 7 whole days. It's going to be amazing. And some friends of mine suggested I go down to this like health retreat on the back of this island in the Thai Gulf. And so I wandered on down to this health retreat, and started doing some yoga and some meditation, started doing some healing and sort of reflecting on what was happening back in Melbourne with these 3 companies. And it wasn't until I sort of started to get some energy back from being away that I realized that, wow, this is ultimately draining. And I realized that I was horribly burnt out. And the way that energy debt works is it's not like you just have a good sleep and you'll be over it. Sort of accumulates and accumulates and accumulates, and I realized that over the years I'd accumulated all this energy debt, and then I just needed to spend some time paying that back. And so I realized I was horribly burnt out, and that it wasn't the right thing to go back and do it all again for another year. It wasn't the right thing by me. It also wasn't the right thing by my teams, by like my community, by the customers who are a part of my other companies. Like, it just didn't really feel like the right thing for anyone. And so I took a good hard look at that situation, and I basically, whilst I was at this retreat in Thailand, I like made some calls and dissolved all of my responsibilities here. So I dissolved all my CEO-ships. I appointed a CEO from one company, I sold another company, and I made another company location independent and appointed someone else in that team to run that company. And then I moved, I bought a one-way ticket to LA and took the year off. So certainly for me, being, having my energy, being so captivated and interested in these companies was amazing. It was a double-edged sword in that I wasn't able to listen to myself and my body enough to know that enough was enough, and I needed to take a step back.
So I assume the community maybe gave back to you at that time as well. I suppose the people actually maybe made things easier for you as well. Those people that you'd probably worked with quite closely over the years. I'd just like to go back to AngelCube briefly. So just maybe some advice to those people that may be looking for some funding or maybe some investment there. What do you think it is? And you always talk about the people that make the businesses or the spaces. When you're looking to invest in a team, is it more the people or the idea, or a combination of both?
I say this a lot, but it's ultimately the founders. So when you're dealing with early stage startup ideas are a dime a dozen. Everyone has ideas, and the sad, hard truth of it is that an idea without the right team to execute it is actually worth nothing. It's actually a drain on you, because having that idea and letting it like boil away and not get anywhere, not get any traction, not setting it free. Ideas need to be set free. They need to grow. You need to nurture them and nourish them and turn them into something amazing. And the only way to do that is to start to execute on them. So ultimately, it's that execution team that is the thing that not only makes the idea successful, but also makes the whole venture investable. So yeah, certainly with AngelCube, we used to get 250 applications a year, and used to get all these people pitching their ideas to me. And it was amazing. It was like such an awesome experience. And to be on that side of the passion is great. But certainly it becomes clear like that ultimately these things are just about people, and that you need to have the right people and the right founders to make these ideas possible and bring them to life.
How can these people shape their teams? Any tips that you could give them to maybe think about how they can bring people together for their small communities and thinking about starting their business?
Yeah, I would say that like when you have a startup, then you have like a lot of people to sell to. You have to sell to your customers. You have to sell to your investors. You have to sell to the people that you're trying to recruit. Every new hire, you're trying to sell them your company, But the first person you have to sell is your co-founders. So the first people that you have to sell onto your vision and like get them a part of that journey are the people who are going to stand by you month, weeks, years down the track, and really be there for you.
You said you've heard a lot of pitches. What was your most memorable pitch?
I don't know why, but there was. I don't know what this says at all. I'm sure there's a great like entertaining answer to this, but a personal one that like is a bit of a I can't believe that one got away, and a little bit of a I don't know. I was just sort of frustrated, but there was this amazing team that came down from Sydney to pitch one time, and the two of them pitched, and they pitched. Has everyone heard the term fast follow? So fast follow means that there's an idea that's been executed in another market already, and you're just executing the same idea or a similar idea in your market. So in the States, there was this startup, and it's called ClassPass. They've now moved across to Australia, so you can join ClassPass today if you like. But going back a few years ago, there wasn't a ClassPass in Australia, and I'd been a ClassPass user in America. And so ClassPass is where basically instead of having one gym membership, you can just subscribe to this app, and it gives you access to a plethora of different gyms. And you can just pick and choose whatever gym classes you want to go to, and it gives you that variety, especially if you're into something like yoga or bar or any of these classes. So yeah, there was a pitch that came in that pitched a ClassPass fast follower, and the founding team seemed to be good. I loved the idea. I knew that it had been reputable. I knew what it felt like to be on the receiving end of that product, but they just made some fundamental mistakes in that pitch that blew it out of the water. Like they had their basic fundamental economics wrong. In that they couldn't crunch the numbers enough to sort of make it all work economically, and that's a really tough thing to hear as an investor, because it sort of shows you that that perhaps the sustainability aspect of that business isn't quite in line. So yeah, for some reason that was just one of the pitches that stuck in my head, mostly because like I really believed in them and I really wanted, and I felt their passion. I wanted to invest in them, but it just wasn't right.
Now, you mentioned that at one point you had to step away from your community because you can't be the one driving the community all the time. Was this difficult for you to do?
Yeah, it was difficult. Yeah. I'm a chronic extrovert. I love other people's company. I love bouncing ideas off other people. I make too much noise for one human. All these sorts of things. And so part of making myself not a big part of the community meant restraining that a lot. So yeah, from a personal point of view, it was hard because it meant that I couldn't play with the other kids for a long time. But yeah, ultimately I think it's important. And honestly, that suppression changed me a lot, and so I feel like I'm still finding my way back from that. I think we all go on our personal journeys when it comes to building these sorts of businesses, especially when there's so many unknowns and whatever else. So yeah, it's actually great now that the community is so large that I'm just a drop in the ocean, and it's great to just play in that jungle and just to be any other member. It's fantastic.
Excellent. And there seems to be quite a shift towards the social enterprise and the kind of ideas that the Dream Factory are looking to take on board and those types of businesses. What's kind of your thoughts on the direction of that, and kind of how you maybe even think about getting those businesses into the Dream Factory as well?
Yeah, so yeah, the Dream Factory has a social impact slant. So we're fostering innovation amongst traditional startup companies, the same as Inspire and Richmond, but we also are firmly focused on social impact and social entrepreneurship and social enterprise. What does that mean for us? It means I mean, I feel like we've always had one foot in that camp. Being a social enterprise ourselves, we're hyper conscious of what it looks like to run those types of businesses. We certainly have opinions around what makes for good social enterprises, and one of our early members, early residents, and also someone who's now on the board of Inspire9 and played a massive part in our community building, Melina Chan. She founded a handful of social enterprises, a lot of social enterprises across Australia and Cambodia. And so with that sort of mentorship and leadership in our team, we're delighted to be able to open up our doors to that type of thing over in the Dream Factory. And so in the Dream Factory right now, we have CoHealth, a community health organisation. We have Engineers Without Borders who are there. So we're already with those sorts of personalities walking around the space. There's already the beginnings of a really awesome experiential space for those sorts of companies.
How is the Dream Factory as well? Do you maybe have any advice for people that are looking maybe to tap into government services as well? So I suppose the Dream Factory maybe get some help from government services to maybe, I don't know, invest in you as such, or maybe some of the ideas as well. So maybe if somebody has got one of those ideas, how can they maybe take that a step further? Maybe accessing services through yourself, or maybe the government as well.
Yeah, gotcha. I think that's certainly something we could do a better job of. There are government services out there to help startups. One thing that we've always been very big behind, and we expose a lot of our resident companies to, is the Australian taxation R&D incentive. So the R&D tax incentive, if anyone has a pen, write this down. This is the most important thing you can walk away from this talk with. R&D tax incentive is the most amazing things that happen to the Australian tax landscape. The incentive will give you 43.5 cents back on the dollar for every dollar that you spend on R&D. So that means that if you're a startup, every single expense that you have in your first 12 months or in the financial year, you can then get 43 cents back on the dollar. So you essentially halve, or little less than halve your running costs. So if you spend $50,000, the difference between that sort of thing and not having that means like founders can pay themselves a wage, and it actually makes financial sense to do so. Founders can, essentially sort of double their runway, which is the amount of money that they need to invest, the amount of money they can last with the amount of money that's invested in the company. So the R&D tax incentive is a big one, and we try and make that as accessible as we possibly can.
So it's double amount of ramen noodles that they can eat, essentially, isn't it? Yes. What do you think about throwing some questions to the audience, Wayne?
Thank you. It was amazing hearing this story from someone who's been around for 8 years in this space. Really inspiring. So my question is, you've been an early bird in this new wave. You've put the building blocks of this new co-working space and this new way of things, and you've been observing how things are changing in our community and society. So my question is, in 10 years' time, apart from technological advance or things like that, in terms of how society changes and how community changes, as someone who's developed some insights, I believe, and have had some instincts into this subject, how do you see things evolve or change in 10 years' time? It could have been influenced by technology, but more of the social and community aspect.
Yeah, I think the social and community aspect of that is actually key. I think I love the fact that you brought that up, because I feel like some people get carried away with this idea that technology will completely transform the way in which we as individuals think and see the world. I think that technology does a lot of things to enable us. One of my favorite sort of ideas around technology is it doesn't just transform the way that you think. It doesn't just like speed up the way that like connections are made. It absolutely transforms the way in which you make decisions and that business functions. Just by nature of making things faster, it's a transformative experience. I think that underpinning a lot of this innovation in technology. Full disclosure, I'm a software developer, right? I live and breathe technology. This is my everyday. I spend hours and hours with my head on a computer all the time.
He does.
So I'm obsessed with this space, and I'm obsessed with I build AI bots in my spare time. So I have a sense of the capabilities, but something that now being so connected to communities, seems so clear to me is that it's not the answer, and it's not going to stop people from wanting to connect. It's not going to stop people from wanting to come and have real human experiences. I think that with the demise of like churches and the role of religion in society, people are starting to crave what this sort of centralized community looks like. And I think that like Inspire9 isn't just a workspace. Inspire9 isn't just a set of resources for people to come to. Inspire9 is a place where, you know, people, where humans come to be humans and to interact with other humans and create that connection. And I don't think that technology replaces that. I don't think that you can throw on a VR headset and then get the same level of interaction. So certainly we're going to get bloody close. It's going to be amazing, right? But even if we do enable it all the way to the stage where it feels like a genuine interaction, you can operate wholly in a virtual world. I still feel like there'll be some sort of internal craving within us that will emerge and that will like draw humans together to try and have this sense of community and this sense of belonging and loving and all the good things that make up humanity. That was a very sort of funny answer to that, wasn't it? Sorry. We got a little hippie-ish there for a second.
Was there another question? Whilst Wayne brings the microphone down, I have a question for you. You say that the community, it's all about the people that you have in there and the people you attract and the people you nurture and you grow. What do you do when someone walks in the door and is not quite the right fit for the community? Do you have any strategies?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when we talk about we don't do, so a traditional business, when they get like customers, they do sales, right? But with our community, we talk about recruiting members and recruiting residents. And that recruitment process has a kind of curation aspect to it, in that we ensure that the kinds of people that we're bringing in prevents our community from going sour. So for example, we could create a monoculture by inviting a whole bunch of people who thought and acted and interacted exactly the same way. And it would just be this massive echo chamber. We could, like that lack of diversity will kill our community ultimately, because it will like blow up or become obsolete or stop growing. And it won't be that that nurturing place where people can develop and grow themselves. So certainly there's a curation aspect to our community. So when people come in, we have an obligation. There's a little bit of a dance that happens where like we show them a little bit of like who we are as a community. We show them a little bit of our values, and we're a little bit upfront about some of the things that are expected or that are commonplace inside of our community. And if that doesn't bode well, then honestly, most of the time it's self-selecting. It's not so much a task of us like saying, hey, you know what? I don't think this is for you. It's more like, you know what? Come on, I'll introduce you to 5 people, and if they feel really uncomfortable about like meeting other humans or functioning in that type of workplace, or being in a place that has music playing, or people saying hi to them when they're walking past them, all these kinds of things, then I feel honestly most of the time it's self-selecting.
There was a gentleman at the front that had a question, so I'll come round. Who was it? There was somebody around this side first, I think, but I think he's gone shy. But
and then, so first, is it fine? Okay. So first thing, you were when I moved to Melbourne, and the first event that I attended for startup. So you were one of the speaker. So I was a bit excited to see you again. So going back to the question. How to build a community. So if I take my own example, we are more of a movie buffs, and we are trying to create a community around it. The first question that comes in mind, apart from the technical things, how to create a strategy. I mean, how to come up with a strategy. Okay, so I know I want to focus on this segment, but how should I go ahead with it?
So when you say focus on this segment, do you mean like...
I mean, no, segment is not a question, strategy. I mean, what step should we follow? Not on the technical side, but more on a logical side. Okay, this is how we should create a strategy to build a community.
Community building strategy. Awesome, yeah, okay. So a common thing amongst building communities that's not so different to building a startup is that like to think big, you first have to go small. So the first people that you invite into your community are going to be the most important people in your community. Because like to get to 100 members, you have to get to 1, and then you have to get to 5, and then you have to get to 10. And the reality, the way that communities work is that the culture that's set in those initial 5 or 10 people is going to be the culture that attracts and that emanates through the rest of your community. So however that first 5 or 10 people interact, whoever they are and whatever they bring to that community and however they interact with each other and the value that they provide is going to stipulate the ongoing success and whoever else that you attract to that community. So it's really important to start to think about who those people are, what that looks like, and go through that curation piece to ensure that you're able to engage with them in a way that you feel like is sustainable and that it's representative of the kind of community that you want to have when you're at 50, 100, 1,000 people. And then the other step I would say is nothing when you talk about a strategy is great for scale. But I think when it comes to the first 5 or 10, just go and talk to people. Just do customer research. Just get in front of customer research is the startup term. In community term, it's just called talking to people. It's just getting down and dirty and figuring out who these passionate people are. The way that communities and startups and any of these sorts of things work is it's all your market or your community is a big bell curve. And so here's the standard deviation, and here's where a majority of your people are. But down the upper end of the bell curve is your early adopters. And these are the people who don't just like what you have on offer. They love it. They want it. They need it. They've been looking for it their entire lives. They're the ones that are prepared to pay 10 times whatever it is that that you're offering to be a part of your community. So find those people and empower them and bring them together, because you're going to be the answer to what they've been seeking. They're the ones that are going to be receptive to whatever it is that you're envisaging.
Thank you.
While Swain walks up there, question: has there ever been a time where you were worried about what the community was becoming?
Yeah, there is, but there's also I think there has to be humility in terms of also thinking about the fact that I can't control that. I certainly can probably influence it as any member can, but to think that I have control over where the community is going is a falsity. Ultimately, the community is its own force, and it grows in ways that I can't control. What I can do is I can think about diversity. I can think about the way in which we curate our residence. I can think about the kinds of influences that we put in and around it. So yeah, we take a measurement of our community. So if you want to improve something, then you have to measure it, right? So for us, measuring engagement, measuring where our community was headed was ultimately important. And we would do things like survey people and try and keep our finger on the pulse of how our residents were feeling by just being a part of their everyday lives. With Inspire, we talk about it we don't mind our own business, we are each other's business. And so that idea of being involved with everyone's work and the way in which they're sort of feeling and acting and the strategies which they're undertaking is part of our job as community managers inside of this space. So I think keeping our finger on the pulse, nothing seemed to be relatively shocking. Everything was, every direction that the community was headed was sort of, we had an intuitive sense for.
Question. I can see how your answer to the strategy would apply to this question, but have you any experience building an online community? And in your lessons in building a community for your physical space, how could you cross that over to online community? Yeah,
totally. So Inspire9 has 5,500 members on its online community platform. And we have over 11,500 followers and things like that. So we have an audience, and we have a fellowship, and we have a community that we interact with online. There are things that don't translate when you're talking about in-person communities versus online communities, but there's a whole lot that does. And so I think ultimately those values and thinking about inclusion, thinking about diversity, thinking about how to eradicate trolls and set a culture that is conducive to developing people and to growth in individual members, as opposed to just adding more people to your follow account. A lot of the same sorts of principles apply, and people become, I suppose, one of the things, it's actually quite narrow when you're talking about an online community, because a lot of it is just publish and see results, publish and see results, publish and see results. Whereas you have so much so many more dimensions to an in-person community, and at the same time, so much more in your artillery. Like you can throw events, or you can like leave stuff on people's desks in the morning, or you can send them off into the weekend with drinks. Like there's a lot more things to consider and a lot more ways of affecting people through an in-person community. But online community, when we talk about our community management, we have a community management academy that we work with, like our own community management team members, as well as like community managers from organizations and workplaces and those types of things. And we have the online component sort of is very, very similar, like similar values, similar sorts of things that are brokered.
Now you mentioned trolls. Now what is a troll, and have you ever had a troll before?
Yeah. So some people just want to watch the world burn. Some people see hundreds and hundreds of people in a community, and they see the growth and everything else, and like I see, wow, that looks amazing. I want to be a part of that. Some people see like, oh, hang on, you know what I need to do? I need to go and mess that community up. I need to go and like start some mayhem. And literally, like there have been people who have done some things, and I've said to them like, tell me about what was happening in your mind when that happened. And they said, I think every community just needs an anarchist. Every community just needs like a troll. So I think like, honestly, I think there must be something inside of certain people that attracts them to play that role inside of either online communities or in-person communities. And yeah, it's great. It's great. It like certainly tests, the edges of where you and your team can be. It puts a lot of stress on people, and like at the time, again, this sort of stuff is amazing in retrospect. At the time, I was pulling my hair out. I'm like, why does this person hate us? Like, what did we do? And I was so worried about the impact that it was having on our team, because like when you're, one of the side effects of being inside of this type of workplace is that everyone cares so much. Everyone like there's nothing that isn't personal, right? So 2017, I'm trying not to take anything personal. This is my personal mantra this year. And I think that's like come out of the idea that for the last 10 years, everything has been freaking personal. So, someone says like, oh, I don't really like this coffee. I'm like, oh, shit. Wow. Is that a reflection on me? But yeah, it's hard to manage trolls when everyone cares so much about the way that everyone interacts and the community and the impact of that. And so, yeah, I think I was super stressed for the impact that would have on our team, more so than just the deterioration of whatever they were trying to do in the community itself. Because people, they care a lot about this sort of stuff, and it keeps them awake at night, and it's tough. But I think ultimately you just have to accept that trolls are a part of life, and that haters gonna hate.
Excellent. There's a gentleman here that'd like to ask a question. Hey, Nate. So, fantastic. You've obviously achieved quite a lot in your life, and obviously in that journey you would have had made quite a few mistakes. If you had your younger self in front of you, what would be the advice or the lessons that you'd give to your younger self?
Me and my younger self are not so dissimilar, I would say. Both of us are relatively naive. Both of us are relatively self-assured in a sort of altruistic kind of way. I think we just both believe that the world should be better, and maybe that we have this like the unfounded belief that we probably can help make that happen. So honestly, I don't really feel like I'm equipped to answer that question. I still feel like I'm an altruistic, wet behind the ears, naive kid. I've still got mistakes to make, and I've still got things I'm going to try and do, and maybe less so in the co-working realm. I feel like there's things there that now perhaps I have a better understanding of. But yeah, I don't feel like I've overcome a lot of these, fundamental mistakes that I was making when I was a kid. If I was to give him any single piece of advice, oh, goodness, it's hard to understand the consequences of saying something like this. But maybe it would just be to have more sense of self, and maybe it would be to look after yourself. that was certainly for the first, it took me 10 years to make that mistake, right? 10 years of making that mistake time and time again, to learn to listen to my body, to learn when enough was enough, to learn like, hey, you can work 120-hour weeks, but do you want to? Is it good for you? Is it going to be the best, not just for you, but for everyone else around you? And certainly maybe like the easy thing to say in retrospect is just have a little more fun.
Just got a question, just building on that. So spending those long hours with that, obviously comes a lot of sacrifice that comes with that. Just wondering what the kind of impacts or sacrifices that you made or had to make for those commitments in terms of a holistic life, with looking at relationships and friendships and family and other things that are happening around there. Was the perfectionistic, the goal in mind of your belief, at what expense or for those other things in those systems got affected?
Yeah, totally. So I think about it in terms of like I lost 3 kids in a divorce, and my 3 kids are the 3 companies that I had when I crash landed on that beach. Yeah, so I feel like I pour a lot of energy into these companies and certainly into the community. And yeah, I don't have any kids. I don't have a relationship. My friends, I guess, they would know me to know that I will drop off the radar for days, weeks, months at a time. Sometimes, work just builds up and up and up, and I'm not at the stage, or I'm less so at the stage, where I'm able to be as responsive and as loving and as good of a friend, as good of a partner as I would want to be. And I'm acutely aware of that, and I think it stares you in the face at some stage of your journey where you realize what you're giving up in order to do the things that you do. So yeah, do I feel lucky to be where I am? Yes, but I know what I've given up to be where I am. I know what I've given up, and I know the hours that I've sunk. I know the grey hairs that are popping up in my head. So yeah, certainly there's been sacrifices, and I'm well aware of what that looks like. And I think that it's like a balancing act. I think for a long, long time, I went without a lot of love in my life. I didn't have a partner. I was married to my work for so long, and I was growing these companies. And this funny, being a classic romantic, I had this idea that I was like saving away this love, this romantic love for someone one day to pop into my life, and we would just have these amazing moments. And it'd be like, oh my God, where's all this been for so long? But there came a time when I was like, wow, maybe that won't happen, and maybe I'm not going to have that. And it was a really awesome moment to get that real with myself and realize that romantic love could just be love, and it didn't have to be saved for a romantic partner. I could like push that into other areas of my life. Like I could love the hell out of my friends and my family, and really love. I didn't have to have children. I could love my friends' children. I have like an amazing godson and my niece who I adore, and it's probably through releasing and sort of redistributing that romantic love that I was pocketing up inside for so long that turned me into a more loving man later on in life, through years and years and years and years of not really knowing what to do with that. So yeah, it's been a big thing.
Nathan, you talk a lot about sacrifice and lessons and personal growth. I'm curious, what has been your most touching moment?
My most touching moment. To be honest, I'm really struggling to get over last Sunday, where my 19-year-old niece, this beautiful little girl, was quite sick all weekend, and she came good just like on Sunday night, and we were sitting on the couch, and I was reading her a book, and she was getting into the book, and me being a digital native, I grabbed my phone to take a little selfie, and I must do it so often now that she like kind of is reading the book and whatever, and then she looks up at the phone and goes, cheese, and like floored me. I was like almost in tears as this kid was just like staring straight down into this phone. So yeah, I don't know, touching now to me is a funny thing. Like I think now it's about those simple, sweet moments, which is why I think that like technology is not going to save us all. I think like ultimately it's about this like real human connection. So for me, that sort of touching moment looks like a genuine. Yeah, I'm not checking Instagram. I'm not I'm not swiping right. It's they're my real connections with people that I love. Yeah.
Hi, Nathan. Thank you so much for being here and sharing so much of your expert advice with us. I appreciate it. And thank you for the library plug too. Very good. Didn't pay him. Love it. I'm curious about that time that you spent in Thailand, and you said you made some calls. And so to me, that means you had someone to call. We haven't really talked about co-founders tonight, or what that looks like for you in terms of the 3 different businesses. Was it one co-founder? Did you have a group of people? I co-founded a community, and now we've actually brought on other people, and there's 5 of us, which is great because occasionally that means that some of us can just drop off the radar. For instance, I'm not going tomorrow to run the event. I'm letting other people do it, and that's hard, but it's been really, really important for all of us to be able to have our own lives. So I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I think I love the idea. So with AngelCube, we used to have this a handful of rules. So one of the rules was we'd never invest in a company with a solo founder. A lot of early stage investment companies have that same mantra, because starting a startup is really hard. Starting a startup by yourself and making that startup successful, like, the odds are just against you. It's statistically an anomaly to run a successful startup as a sole founder. And so, and not only that, but it's almost inhumane. It's almost it almost sounds like, torturous. I feel like, human rights legislation would come down hard on you. And so, yeah, we used to have that rule that we would never invest in a solo founder. And I feel a little guilty because I started a lot of businesses by myself. There was one of my companies I had founders in, and I started a lot of companies. And when I was younger, I did the 5 people in type thing. And one of them was like stealing money, and it was very weird. But we were young. It was like we were 17 or something. And I think now where I sit with that type of thing, I think it's more around who you are and your personality type. Like for me, I am quite passionate, and I can self-motivate to the point where I probably have enough energy and enough drive for a couple of people. And so, like, perhaps I fill in that co-founder role in that way, but certainly I would love someone to level me out on the things that I don't like to do in business. So I'm quite high level visionary. I'd love to have someone who's like low level and sort of details focused to sort of balance that. So I think one of the amazing things that you learn as a founder is that you learn what your strengths are, but also what your weaknesses are. And you learn how to identify the positions that you're going to put yourself in, and what those weaknesses are going to entail. So knowing that I'm quite high level and probably going to zone out when you start talking about, legal details for so-and-so a contract at so-and-so a term, it will literally just sound like so-and-so is so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so. And I'll just be like, I'm going to send this to my lawyer later. So yeah, having someone who can actually listen along, and or 4 other people who can listen along is amazing. And yeah, life is richer with that experience. Like, it's just really great. Again, like I think there's just great opportunities to build amazing things, and to do that with other people is a really special experience, and it teaches you a lot. Like the growth that I now get to go on is a lot around. I kind of have to open up a lot because I was forced to close down because I had to force myself into these extreme work conditions. So in opening up, I learned a lot about, how I would broker those sorts of relationships with other people. So I'm excited about having a co-founder one day.
Thanks for sharing a lot, not just about your social enterprise, but also your personal journey. So I've met a few founders, and one thing that somehow I learned from them is sometimes the founders go through different crises, and I think you've been through a few of those as well. What do you do now to make sure that you don't fall again into those traps? Let's say working too much, or perhaps being an extrovert person as well. Sometimes, your vision goes really, really fast, and you disregard the people. You can disregard the people around you. What do you put in place to make sure that that listening part from your side doesn't close? Yeah,
absolutely. I'm not too sure that those skills are dissimilar. Like, I think like your question around what I do now and how I make sure that I don't move too fast for the people around me, I think ultimately both things have the same trait in common that requires you to get through that, and that is empathy. I think you have to have empathy with yourself, and you have to become a good listener to yourself, and have to have humility and sort of work through the times where you're a shitty self and the times where you're a high-performing, amazing self. And there's going to be a scale, and different days are going to, be different. And that's just the way it's going to be. And it's the same with your team. And I think that no matter how far ahead you're moving from a visionary point of view, or how many steps ahead you are of everyone else in your team, my role as a founder isn't to be that far ahead. My role as a founder is to take us all on a journey. It's to take everyone else along for the ride. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned in like the last 4 years. Is that there's no point in getting somewhere where no one else can be. You have to bring everyone else along for that ride. You have to build bridges. You have to, put up ladders. And so when you uncover this amazing thing, certainly being inside of a community helps you become acutely aware of it. Is that, if you get there, then it's just you there, and there's nothing special about that. Like exploiting something at that sort of level is a lonely, sad place. So bringing people along for the ride, I think also deeply underpinned in the culture of Inspire 9 as a result of perhaps my computer science background, is this whole idea of open source. And open source is this idea that you can, things are better if you let them free, if you set them free. So if you build an amazing, innovative computer science library, programming library, then you can allow hundreds of thousands of people to contribute to it and make it better for the greater good of man, rather than like hold it and keep it as a proprietary piece of software. That mentality, I feel like I've tried to have resonate the community culture inside of Inspire 9. And so, yeah, I think the way that I now consider, I think that for me, in terms of the way that I have empathy with myself, like I have to schedule, I schedule everything in my life, right? I schedule my meetings, I schedule time to meet with my team, time to work, all this sort of stuff. So I need to schedule time for wellness as well. Like I schedule yoga, and I'll have time in the mornings, which I'm my best self in the mornings, right? And so I feel like I deserve to have that time with me. And so I choose to spend the first couple of hours of my day hanging with me, and I'll make myself a nice breakfast and take that time to just unwind. I'm trying to get good at cooking, so I purposely do things that are not optimized, because I try and optimize every other aspect of my life, that are completely inefficient, because I go to town like thinking about what if I schedule that differently, and then maybe I'll get an extra hour in, I'll be able to do that other piece of work. Yeah, I'll do that. In the morning, none of that. It's like I just leave shit around the house. I just like cook something that's going to take way too long, but it'll be amazing. And there's there's learnings from that. So yeah, I think I take a lot of care and have a bit of empathy with myself in those mornings, try and set myself up to maintain that throughout the day, and then hopefully that has a knock-on effect to the way in which I interact with my team and the people in and around me who I'm trying to lead.
Hi, Nathan. I heard you actually speak at Inspire 9 at the Fuck Up Nights a couple of months ago, which was really, really good to hear you there. And you obviously touched on a few of your learnings from that again here, especially around that burnout and how you realized that trying to run 3 businesses simultaneously probably wasn't the best thing for your health. The question I've got is around I guess deciding on like picking an idea and going for it versus trying lots of things and seeing what works. Like, so what decision-making process do you go through to decide that this is the idea I'm going to go for and actually then go about delivering it?
David Hannemeyer Hansen, the guy from 37 Signals, or I think his company is now called Basecamp. He's a successful entrepreneur. And they've never taken VC funding, but they have one of the higher growing bootstrapped companies in the industry. And people keep asking him, like, you're a smart guy. What are you going to do next? Like, you must have all these other ideas. And he said, why would I have better ideas? I did my best idea. This is my best idea, and I'm doing it. So I think to me, like I can't relate to that so much, but I feel like yeah, certainly like I like the idea strategically of thinking about what your best idea is and trying and going for that. But hearing you talk about like, do I pick one idea or try a few? I think when it comes to startups, you sort of end up doing both. So another key thing that I would push upon founders in AngelCube is that they would have to not be wedded to their idea. So if their idea wasn't going to get traction and wasn't going to be commercially viable, then they would need to change. So they would need to either pivot, so just modify that idea in some way, shape or form, focusing on a different market or, you know, different dynamics with the economic model, or just drop the idea and try something else. I think with like nowadays, startups can be quite a scientific process. You can roll out lean startup theory and build, measure, learn, and iterate in this cycle. I think it's become cheaper and easier and faster than ever before to just like do some feasibility analysis around a startup idea, to go and test your market, to go and build a $0 MVP and just ship it and see what comes back. With that in mind, I mean, I feel like you should spend a week just doing some customer validation and see if there are people out there who want your product and who think that your idea is not who think your idea. You test your idea, test the feasibility of your idea, because ultimately you're going to marry that idea, and that idea is going to like drive you into somewhere for the next 5 to 10 years. And so you want it to nurture you, and you want it to give back, and you want it to be valuable.
Nathan, I think how are we going on time? Do we have time for a few more questions?
We've got a couple more,
One more
questions.
yeah.
Yeah. Nathan, just a quick. Oh, sorry, Kim, I'm interrupting there.
Just
Just a quick one. You touched upon yoga. The last topic, the talk before now, was based around happiness and meditation. Does meditation have a place in your life, or do you maybe even look to maybe utilize that in the future?
Yeah. I'm big into yoga. Like yoga is one of the things that I spend more and more time on in the last couple of years, and it's awesome. I fucking love this yoga thing. It's amazing. I wish. Actually, let's take back that earlier. What I would tell my younger self question. Tell Nathan, let's get into the yoga, buddy. Yeah, it's great. It's has anyone not tried yoga? Ah, goodness. Okay, cool. So R&D tax incentive and yoga. Those are the two things you got to write down. Yoga's really good, really fun. And there's like a physical component to it, and then there's like a knock-on wellness and mental component to it. It just relaxes you and can put you in a meditative state. So I'm not great at meditation yet. I'm still working on that. But it's easy for me to move into a meditative state, like with some yoga practice, and I'll get the breathing happening and the movement of my body, and it helps me get out of my head and do a whole lot of other things, and it's really good. And nowadays, like, there's so many different levels. Like, you can have like super spiritual yoga, you can have like hippy dippy yoga, you can have like really strong yoga, like yoga that will have you like, I'm trying to do handstands at the moment. Can anyone do a handstand? Because we should talk. This is okay, cool. You and me afterwards. I want to hear your handstand tips. And then you got like power living yoga, which is like just sweat it all out. And you got Bikram, like it's crazy types of yoga. It's amazing. So yeah, I feel like from that a la carte menu of different yoga types, I have this sort of meditation and this sort of wellness thing at my fingertips. And I feel very lucky to have found that.
Final question. It's going to be the most difficult question of the night. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Out of your entire journey, what are you most proud of? And this can be business, family, or personal.
Oh. Pride was something that I feel like I had to learn. I grew up in a very selfless family and around people who I feel like weren't. They taught me not to be proud. So for me, it was less about building something to be proud of and more about like having an impact. So that word pride is something that I've re-established my relationship with in the last couple of years, almost to try and find different levels of contentment around the things that I've done. So I guess there's a lot of things that I'm proud of. What am I most proud of? So yeah, again, this is like new to me, so I've got to sort of think about it. But I don't know, because pride almost constitutes some sort of ownership. And there are things in my life that I've contributed to that I don't necessarily feel like I own. I love the fact that Inspire 9 exists. There's no way that I could pretend that that community isn't a force unto itself. I stepped back and stopped being the driving force behind that community a long time ago, and now it is what it is because of the people who are in it and because of the community. So I love Inspire 9, and I guess I'm proud of my part, my role in that community. What else am I proud of? In terms of other ways in which I look after myself, I do a gratitude ritual in the morning. I think about all the things in my life that I'm grateful for, and I like to sort of say them to myself in my head. So maybe like pride and gratitude, like sort of have this like crossover. So I'm like really grateful and proud of like my beautiful niece who giggles when I take a selfie. Yeah, and my family. Like I'm proud. Yeah, it's a funny one. Pride. Yeah, I'm proud to be able to, like, how lucky are we to be here in Australia and to be in a library and to have a government that will put money into these sorts of things. Government, library plug. I feel like we're ultimately very, very privileged and very, very lucky. And I think that maybe more so than pride comes that idea that there's a certain responsibility and certain entitlements that we can use to like make the world a better place as a result of that. So I don't know how I pivoted pride into social obligation, but there you have it.
I think you've answered the question.
Ladies and gentlemen, can you please join me with a round of applause for Nathan?
Thank you very much, Nathan.